The security checkpoint at Naval Air Station Oceana had processed thousands of personnel that morning, but the Marine Corporal manning Gate 7 had never seen someone quite like this. She arrived on foot, no uniform, just faded jeans and a leather jacket worn soft at the elbows. Her ID said Lieutenant Commander Kira Volkov, but the young Marine saw a woman who looked more suited to a college campus than a military installation. His partner, barely 6 months out of boot camp, actually laughed when she approached. The sound carried across the checkpoint, sharp and dismissive in the October air. "Ma'am, this gate is for authorized personnel only," the corporal said, not bothering to hide his smirk. "Public tour are." "I'm not here for a tour." Her voice was quiet, almost gentle, with the faintest trace of an accent that might have been Russian, might have been something else entirely. She held out her military ID, the morning sun catching the holographic seal. The corporal barely glanced at it. "Right, and I'm the commandant of the Marine Corps." His partner laughed again, louder this time. "Listen, lady, I don't know where you got that fake ID, but—" "It's not fake." Still that same quiet voice, patient in a way that should have been a warning. "And I need to get through. I'm expected at the flight line." The corporal leaned forward, his face hardening. "You know what? I'm tired of people trying to—" He reached out and pushed her shoulder, not hard, but enough to make his point. "Turn around and walk away before I call the MPs." What happened next would be replayed on security footage 17 times before the sun set. Kira didn't move when he pushed her, didn't even sway. She simply looked at his hand on her shoulder, then at his face, and in that moment something shifted in her eyes. Not anger, something colder. "Corporal," she said softly, "I'm going to give you one chance to check that ID properly. Look at the unit designation. Look at the clearance level. Then I'm going to ask you a question, and your answer is going to determine whether you spend the next month doing perimeter checks in the rain." The corporal's smirk faltered. Something in her tone, in the absolute calm of her posture, made him actually look at the ID this time. His face went white. "DVGRU liaison, TSSCI clearance, direct report to NAVSPCWARCOM." His voice cracked slightly on the acronyms. Behind them, 3 Humvees were pulling up to the checkpoint, and through the windshield of the lead vehicle, a Navy captain was already reaching for his door handle. The captain emerged like a thunderstorm given human form, his uniform crisp despite the humidity, ribbons covering his left chest in a cascade of color that told stories most people would never hear. Commander James Reese had the build of someone who'd spent 30 years perfecting the art of controlled violence, and right now that control was being tested. He took in the scene with a single glance. The 2 Marines at attention, though their postures had gone rigid for the wrong reasons, and Kira standing utterly still in her civilian clothes, that same patient expression on her face. "Lieutenant Commander Volkov," Reese's voice could have cut steel, "I apologize for the delay. These Marines were just doing their job." The emphasis on just carried enough weight to make both young men flinch. "Were they?" Kira's tone remained even, conversational almost. "Because from where I'm standing, Corporal Mitchell here just put his hands on a senior officer without checking her credentials. That's not doing his job. That's assuming someone can't be what they claim to be based on how they look walking up to a gate." Mitchell, the name clearly visible on his uniform now that Reese was present, looked like he wanted the asphalt to open up and swallow him whole. His partner had gone absolutely silent, eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance where his career prospects had been moments before. "Sir, I mean, she wasn't." Mitchell stumbled over the words, his face shifting from white to red. "She wasn't in uniform," Reese finished, his voice flat. "She wasn't arriving in a staff car. She didn't look like what you expected a DEVGRU liaison to look like. So you decided the ID must be fake, the credentials must be wrong, and rather than following procedure, you put your hands on her. Does that about cover it, Corporal?" The silence that followed could have swallowed sound itself. Somewhere on the flight line, a jet engine spooled up, the whine carrying across the base like a distant scream. Kira watched Mitchell's face, watched the precise moment he understood what he'd done, and felt something almost like sympathy. Almost. "Permission to proceed, Commander," she asked Reese, already knowing the answer but giving him the courtesy of command. "Granted, we're late for the briefing as it is." He turned to Mitchell. "Corporal, you and I are going to have a very long conversation with your co about proper security procedures and the assumption of authority. But first, you're going to apologize to Lieutenant Commander Volkov." Mitchell snapped to attention, his apology crisp and mechanical, drained of everything except pure military formality. Kira accepted it with a nod, nothing more, and walked through the gate. The Humvee ride to the flight line took 6 minutes that stretched like hours. Reese sat in the passenger seat, silent, while Kira watched the base roll pass through the windows of FA-18 Super Hornets gleaming in their parking revetments, maintenance crews swarming over airframes like ants with purpose. She'd been stationed at Oshina before, years ago, when she'd been a nugget fresh out of flight school with more enthusiasm than sense. The base looked the same. She didn't. "You handled that well," Reese finally said, not looking at her. "Could have made it worse for him." "Could have." Kira's reflection in the window showed nothing, no smile, no satisfaction, just that same calm that people always mistook for weakness until they learned better. But what would be the point? He's young. He made an assumption based on incomplete data. In 6 months, he'll know better. In 6 years, he'll be the one telling that story to a boot who needs to hear it. "You sound like you've been there." "Different uniform, same lesson." She turned from the window as the Humvee pulled up to a hangar marked with nothing except a numbered designation and a security classification warning. Everyone underestimates something. The trick is surviving long enough to learn from it. The briefing room was already full when they entered, 20 personnel representing 5 different special operations units, all of them turning to look at the woman in civilian clothes walking in beside Commander Reese. Kira saw the reaction's confusion, dismissal, one or two who actually recognized her and filed them away for later. The mission brief would sort out who needed to learn about assumptions today. A Navy lieutenant at the front stood when Reese entered, but his eyes were on Kira. "Sir, we're still waiting on the DEVGRU liaison. Should we?" "You're looking at her, Lieutenant." Reese's voice carried no inflection, just fact delivered with the weight of absolute authority. "This is Lieutenant Commander Kira Volkov, Callsign Prizrak. She's here to brief us on an operation that JSOC has been planning for 8 months. I suggest you pay attention." Prizrak? The name rippled through the room like wind across water. 3 people sat up straighter. One Air Force major actually paled slightly. In the back row, a SEAL senior chief nodded once, slowly, and Kira caught the gesture. She moved to the front of the room with the economy of motion that came from having done this before, in smaller rooms, with scarier audiences. The laptop was already connected to the projector. She pulled up the first SLIDA satellite image of a compound in the Hindu Kush Mountains, coordinates redacted, scale bar showing 500 meters. "Good morning. Some of you know me, most of you don't. That's going to change in the next 30 minutes. She clicked to the next slide. "This is Target Objective Rhino, a high-value facility that intelligence suggests houses both weapons development infrastructure and command personnel for a group you've all heard of but probably can't spell. We're going in at 0300 local time, 5 days from now. And we're doing it with a level of coordination that will make Operation Neptune Spear look like a training exercise." The room had gone completely silent. Kira continued, her voice never rising, never falling, just that same steady delivery that made every word feel like carved stone. She detailed the approach 3 insertion points, timed to the second, with air support from assets nobody in this room would ever see on a manifest. She explained the egress routes, the contingencies, the nightmare scenarios that kept planners awake at night. And through it all, she watched faces change. The Air Force major leaned forward, taking notes. The lieutenant who'd questioned her arrival had pulled out a tablet, stylus moving rapidly. And in the back, that SEAL senior chief was nodding again, slower now, his eyes never leaving her face. "Questions?" Kira finally asked, 43 minutes into what was supposed to be a 30-minute brief. A hand went up. Marine captain, probably here as a liaison for ground element coordination. "Ma'am, this insertion profile, the low-level run through that valley, you've flown it before." 17 times. 12 in simulation, 5 operational. 3 of those 5 were hot. She clicked to a new slide showing the valley from a pilot's perspective, the terrain rising on both sides like jagged teeth. The approach requires maintaining 200 feet AGL through a corridor that narrows to less than a quarter mile in places. At night, with mountains on both sides generating unpredictable wind shear. Any pilot who tells you it's easy is either lying or hasn't done it. "And you're flying lead on this op." Kira's expression didn't change. "I'm flying the only aircraft on this op that matters. The insertion birds are yours to worry about. My job is to make sure nothing flying on their side of the line interferes with your job. That means I'll be in the area 30 minutes before your boots hit the ground, and I won't leave until every soul is accounted for and heading home. Clear?" "Crystal, ma'am." The briefing continued for another hour, drilling down into details that most people would never think about: weather windows, communications protocols, extraction priorities if everything went wrong. By the time Kira closed her laptop, the initial skepticism had evaporated like morning mist, replaced by something closer to respect, or at least professional acknowledgement. Reese found her afterward, in the hangar where her aircraft sat under guard. The F-35C looked like something pulled from a science fiction film, its angles all wrong for conventional aerodynamics, radar-absorbent coating drinking the light rather than reflecting it. Maintenance crews were swarming over it with the careful reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. "They're good people in there," Reese said, nodding back toward the briefing room. "But they needed to see you first, needed to understand who's running point on this." "I know." Kira ran her hand along the F-35's leading edge, feeling the slight texture of the coating under her palm. "That corporal at the gate, the lieutenant who didn't know I was already here, half the people in that briefing room, they all saw the same thing. Someone who didn't fit their picture of what authority looks like. It's not malice. It's just pattern recognition working with incomplete data." "That's generous of you." "Is it?" She turned to face him. 10 years ago I was that corporal. Different situation, same assumption. I looked at a senior officer in civilian clothes, Chinese guy, older, could have been anyone, and I decided he didn't belong. Took him about 15 seconds to educate me on why I was wrong. I've never forgotten that feeling." Reese studied her face, seeing something there that most people missed. "And now you're the one doing the educating." "Now I'm the one who knows better than to assume. It's a harder lesson to teach than you'd think." She glanced at her watch. "We have 5 days before launch. I need 3 of those days in the simulator, making sure I can fly that valley blindfolded if the avionics go down. The other 2 days are for contingency planning and memorizing faces, because when things go wrong, and they will, I need to know who I'm covering." "You sound certain things will go wrong." "Commander, in my experience, things always go wrong. The only variable is how wrong and whether we're prepared for it." She moved toward the aircraft's ladder, each step precise and measured. "The corporal at the gate learned today that assumptions cost you credibility. In 5 days, we're going into a place where assumptions cost lives. I'd rather everyone learn the easy lesson now." She climbed into the cockpit and didn't look back. The next 3 days blurred into a rhythm of simulation runs and briefing updates. Kira flew the approach to target objective Rhino, 47 times 12 clean runs, 35 with introduced complications ranging from engine failure to complete avionics blackout to scenarios where half her flight surfaces stopped responding. On the 36th run, The simulator technician threw everything at her: simultaneously hydraulic failure, electronic warfare jamming, and a simulated SAM launch. And she still put the aircraft through the valley and on target within the acceptable window. Jesus Christ, the technician muttered over the intercom, watching her debug a completely dead heads-up display while manually calculating intercept angles. Where the hell did you learn to fly like that? Kira didn't answer immediately. She was running shutdown procedures on the simulator, methodical even in the pretend darkness of a pretend emergency. When the screens finally went black, she pulled off her helmet and looked at the technician through the canopy. Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, places where the bad guys don't follow the Geneva Conventions and the good guys barely remember them. You learn fast or you don't learn at all. She popped the canopy. Same time tomorrow. Ma'am, you've already exceeded the training requirement by like 300%. Then tomorrow we'll make it 400, because someone in that valley is going to try very hard to kill me, and I'd prefer they fail. She climbed down from the simulator, legs slightly stiff from 6 hours in the cramped space. When's the next weather update for the target area? 1800 hours. I'll be in the operations center. The operations center occupied a secure space 2 levels below the main hangar, all concrete and fluorescent light, and the constant hum of cooling systems fighting the heat from rows of computer terminals. Kira found Commander Reese there, along with the SEAL senior chief from the briefing. His name was Hendricks, and his record read like something from an action film, all redacted operations and classified commendations. Prizrak, Hendricks nodded when she entered. Heard you've been living in the simulator. Preparing for contingencies. She moved to the main display showing the satellite feed of target objective Rhino. The latest analysis shows increased vehicle traffic near the compound's southern approach. That's new. We caught that too. Reese pulled up a timeline showing movement patterns over the past 72 hours. Could be routine supply runs. Could be them moving assets in preparation for something. Or they know we're coming. Kira traced the movement patterns with one finger, not quite touching the screen. This pattern here, 3 vehicles arriving within a 2-hour window, staying for less than 30 minutes each, then dispersing to different locations. That's not resupply. That's a meeting. Someone important enough to require security protocols. Hendricks leaned closer. You think they've been tipped? I think we should assume they're not sitting around waiting to be surprised. The latest intel has them running irregular patrols, varying the timing, mixing up the routes. That's threat-aware behavior. Someone over there is thinking about defense. She pulled up the flight path overlay, the thin red line that marked her approach through the valley. Which means I need to be thinking 3 moves ahead. This is turning into a much hotter op than the original brief suggested, Reese said quietly. We might need to push back the timeline. No, Kira's voice was flat, final. We push back, they have more time to prepare. We go dark, they know something's coming. The window is now, while they're threat-aware but not threat-certain. That gap is what we exploit. The 2 men looked at each other, that wordless communication that came from decades in the military, where sometimes the most important conversations happened in silence. Finally, Hendricks nodded. She's right. We commit now or we scrub the whole thing and start over in 6 months, assuming the target is even still there. He turned to Kira. But that Valley Run, if they've got air defense set up in there, even old Soviet-era stuff, you're going to be threading a needle in the dark while someone shoots at you. Then I better not miss. She minimized the overhead display and pulled up the terrain map. Senior Chief, I need to know your extraction priorities. If the mission goes wrong and you've got wounded, what's your preference, medical evac first, or everyone out together? Everyone out together. We don't leave people behind. Even if that means increased risk to the extraction aircraft. Even if that means multiple runs into a hot LZ. Hendricks's face could have been carved from granite, especially then. Kiera nodded slowly, committing that answer to memory along with everything else she'd learned about the people she'd be covering, their priorities, their limits, the things they valued more than their own safety. Understood. Then we structure the air support accordingly. I'll maintain orbit over the compound for the duration of your ground time, regardless of threat level. If you call for extract, I'll be your cover while the hellos come in. If they can't come in, I'll make the runs myself. The F-35 doesn't have troop carrying capacity, but it has enough weapons to turn that valley into a highway to hell for anyone trying to follow you. That's a lot of time over target for a solo aircraft, Reese observed. You'll be Winchester on weapons pretty quick if things get hot. Then I'll use what I have creatively. Guns still work when the missiles are gone, and there's always the option of flying very low and very fast over people who don't want me there. The psychological effect of a jet at 200 feet can be worth more than actual ordnance sometimes. She said it casually, like discussing a routine training flight, and Hendricks actually smiled a slight thing, gone almost as soon as it appeared but genuine. You've done that before. More times than I can count. There's an art to a tangle of approach, timing, making sure they hear you before they see you so the fear has time to build. Works best at dusk, when the light's failing and everything becomes shadows and sound. Second best is dawn, when everyone's tired and their nerves are already shot. Least effective is midday, but even then, if you come in right, you can make someone decide that being somewhere else is better than being where they currently are. The operations center had gone quiet around them. Other personnel had stopped what they were doing, listening to this woman describe combat aviation like it was art criticism, her voice never rising, never falling into bravado or false modesty. The thing people forget about air support, Kiera continued, is that half the job is being seen and heard. The other half is being ready to deliver violence so precisely that you can put ordnance within meters of friendly forces without making anyone nervous. That precision is what separates professionals from people who just know how to fly fast. And which one are you? Reese asked, though the question was rhetorical at this point. You're about to find out, Commander. In 48 hours, we'll all find out exactly what we are. The 48 hours passed like water through Fingers' brief meetings, equipment checks, a final mission brief where every possible contingency was explored and planned for. Kiera slept in 4-hour blocks, ate when reminded, and spent every other moment either in the simulator or reviewing intelligence updates. The increased vehicle traffic at target objective Rhino had continued, and analysis now suggested something bigger than routine operations was happening. The mission was still green, but the threat level had been upgraded from moderate to substantial. On the evening before launch, Kiera found herself standing alone on the flight line, watching the sun set behind the rows of aircraft. The F-35C sat in its revetment like a coiled spring, fueled, armed, pre-flighted, and ready. In 12 hours, she'd be strapping into that cockpit for real, with live weapons and hostile intent, and people depending on her to be exactly as good as she'd claimed to be. Nervous, Hendricks had approached without sound, a habit from too many years of needing to move quietly. Would you believe me if I said no? Not particularly. I've been doing this for 23 years, and I'm nervous before every op. The day I stop being nervous is the day I retire, because that's when I'll know I've stopped taking it seriously. Kiera glanced at him. Your team ready? As ready as they'll ever be. Good men, experienced, smart enough to be scared but professional enough to not let it slow them down. They know the mission, they know the risks. They know you're the one keeping the sky clear while they work. He paused. They trust you. That story about the gate incident has made the rounds. Word is you could have destroyed that corporal's career and chose not to. People notice things like that. I didn't do it for reputation. I know, that's why it matters. Hendricks looked out at the flight line, at the rows of aircraft painted in shades of gray that would disappear against clouds and sea. You know what the senior guys call you, the ones who have been around long enough to remember. I'm afraid to ask. Prizrak, you're Coulson, but they actually use it. They use it because that's what you are up there, a ghost. The bad guys never see you coming, and the good guys only know you're there because suddenly their problems start disappearing. That's rare. Most pilots want glory. You seem to prefer being a ghost story that keeps people alive. Kira didn't respond immediately. The sun had almost set now, the sky turning that particular shade of purple that only happened at military installations, where the light pollution was controlled and the horizon was unobstructed. Senior Chief, can I tell you something I've never told anyone in an official briefing? Of course. I'm not actually a great pilot. Don't get me wrong, I'm good. I'm competent. I know my aircraft and I know my systems and I don't make stupid mistakes. But I'm not some natural ace with magic hands who can make an airplane do impossible things through sheer talent. She turned to face him. What I am is someone who's been scared enough times to get really, really good at not dying. Every trick I know, every technique I use, every split-second decision that looks like instinct. It's all learned behavior from situations where I didn't have the luxury of being anything except perfect. People call me Prizrak because I'm hard to kill, not because I'm gifted, because I'm persistent. Hendricks was quiet for a long moment, processing this confession from someone who'd spent the past week demonstrating exactly the kind of competence that made people assume natural talent. That might be the most honest thing anyone said to me in 5 years, he finally said. And it doesn't make me trust you less. If anything, the opposite, because talent can fail you, persistence doesn't. We'll see tomorrow. The Valley doesn't care about persistence. It just cares about whether you make the right decisions in the right order fast enough that physics doesn't catch up. Then I'll see you on the other side, Prizrak. And if you're half as persistent as you claim, I have no doubt you'll be there. He walked away, leaving Kira alone with the sunset and her aircraft, and the weight of everything that would happen when the sun rose again. 12 hours, 720 minutes, 43,200 seconds, each one bringing them closer to a valley in the Hindu Kush where assumptions would be tested and persistence would be measured in milliseconds, and survival would depend on every lesson she'd ever learned about not being what people expected. At 0230 local time, Kira was already in the cockpit, running through pre-flight checks with the methodical precision of someone who'd done this hundreds of times in exactly this way. Each switch, each button, each system status confirmed and logged. The F-35's displays glowed soft blue in the darkness, painting her face in colors that made her look like something from another world. Tower cleared her for departure at 0255. The engine spooled up with a sound like controlled thunder, and Kira felt that familiar compression in her chest as the aircraft began to move. No dramatic gestures, no last words over the radio, just a pilot and her machine, launching into darkness to keep people alive who didn't even know her name. The Valley would tell them all who she really was.